The trailer for episode 46 of Eşref Rüya marks a critical turning point in the series, signaling that the narrative has finally reached a point of no return for its central characters. When analyzing a teaser of this magnitude, it is essential to look beyond the immediate shock value of the scenes and instead dissect the underlying psychological shifts that have been building up over the past several weeks. The show has spent a considerable amount of time establishing a fragile status quo, where secrets were kept under the guise of protection and alliances were formed out of sheer necessity rather than genuine trust. In this upcoming episode, that entire framework is clearly about to shatter, and the trailer gives us the exact coordinates of where the cracks are forming. At the very heart of this upcoming episode is the profound breakdown of communication between Eşref and Rüya. For a long time, their dynamic has been defined by a mutual understanding that they were fighting against the world together, even when external forces tried to pull them apart. However, the imagery in this preview suggests that the threat is no longer outside their circle, but entirely within it. Eşref's demeanor in these scenes is telling. He carries the heavy, defensive posture of a man who knows his back is against the wall. He has spent chapters trying to manage the fallout of past decisions, believing he could control the narrative and shield Rüya from the harshest realities of their situation. But as we see from Rüya's intense and emotionally charged reactions, the truth has independent legs, and it has finally caught up with them. This is not a standard lover's quarrel or a temporary misunderstanding that can be smoothed over with a heartfelt apology in the final act. This feels like a fundamental shattering of trust, where Rüya realizes that the person she deemed her greatest protector has actually been keeping her in the dark about the very things that define her own fate. Predicting the trajectory of episode 46 requires us to look closely at how Rüya is positioned in these brief clips. In previous arcs, she has often been the emotional anchor, navigating the chaos brought on by Eşref's volatile world while trying to maintain a sense of stability. In this trailer, however, her energy has completely shifted. There is a distinct coldness and determination in her eyes that suggests she is done being a passive observer or a victim of circumstance. We can highly anticipate that this episode will showcase Rüya taking complete agency over her situation, potentially making a choice that completely defies Eşref's expectations. If she decides to distance herself from his plans or make an independent move to secure her own safety and answers, it will completely flip the power dynamic of the show. Eşref is a character who thrives on control, and seeing him realize that he can no longer dictate Rüya's actions or choices will likely drive him into a state of desperation, leading to reckless behavior that could worsen an already volatile situation. Beyond the central duo, the trailer heavily hints at a massive realignment among the surrounding players. The narrative has reached a stage where neutrality is no longer an option, and the characters who have spent the last few episodes playing both sides or hiding in the shadows are finally being forced into the light. The tense standoffs teased in the family estate suggest that a major confrontation is brewing, one where ultimatums will be delivered and long-standing loyalties will be permanently severed. The body language of the supporting cast in these scenes indicates that everyone is preparing for a structural collapse of their current network. Someone who Eşref considered a reliable ally is likely going to make a move that protects their own self-interest, leaving him more isolated than he has ever been. This sense of impending isolation is what makes the upcoming episode feel so high stakes. It strips away the safety nets that the characters and the audience have come to rely on. Furthermore, we must consider the pacing and structural buildup that this episode promises. A trailer with this much emotional weight rarely leads to a quiet, reflective episode. Instead, it acts as a pressure cooker, where every scene increases the tension until the final moments deliver a definitive blow. The narrative is accelerating toward a breaking point, meaning that the fallout from the scenes in episode 46 will likely set the tone for the remainder of the season. The show is moving away from episodic conflicts and anchoring itself into a deep, serialized drama where every action has an irreversible reaction. Audiences should prepare themselves for an episode that doesn't just push the plot forward, but fundamentally reshapes the emotional landscape of the series, leaving everyone to scramble for solid ground as the foundation built their lives on begin to crumble entirely. The deeper we look into the structure of this trailer, the more apparent it becomes that episode 46 is intentionally designed to dismantle the very foundations of the story. Taking the psychological tension established in the first half of our analysis, Part 2 must focus on the specific structural mechanics of how this narrative collapse will play out on screen, particularly through the lens of individual character motivations and the fracturing of the family dynamic. The estate itself is clearly becoming a battleground, not for physical violence, but for psychological dominance. For dozens of episodes, this setting has represented a fortress of traditional authority, but the trailer indicates that this authority is being actively challenged from within. We see quick cuts of intense arguments where the traditional hierarchy is completely ignored. This suggests that the younger generation, led by the ideological shifts in Eşref and the sudden awakening of Rüya, is no longer willing to play by the rules established by their elders. The dialogue, though brief in a teaser, carries the weight of a generational shift. We can predict that a significant portion of the 30-minute mark in the episode will be dedicated to a formal breakdown of family contracts, where financial, social, and emotional obligations are thrown out the window in favor of survival. This brings us to the tactical mistakes Eşref is bound to make in this episode. Historically, when Eşref loses his grip on a situation, his immediate instinct is to escalate the conflict to force his opponents into submission. However, the trailer shows him looking unusually quiet in certain frames, which is arguably more terrifying than his outbursts. This quietness implies a calculated desperation. He is likely realizing that his usual methods of intimidation or strategic maneuvering will not work on Rüya anymore. When a character who relies on strategic control runs out of moves, they become highly unpredictable. We can expect Eşref to attempt a high-stakes gamble in the midsection of the episode, perhaps trying to intercept a truth or a document before it reaches Rüya, only for the plan to backfire spectacularly and expose his hand completely. Simultaneously, the secondary characters are no longer just reacting to Eşref and Rüya. They are actively driving their own agendas into the narrative wedge. The trailer gives us fleeting but significant glances at individuals who have been quietly gathering information for episodes. In episode 46, this gathered information becomes currency. The betrayal we are anticipating will likely not come from an obvious enemy, but from a close associate who realizes that staying loyal to Eşref is a sinking ship. This creates a brilliant layer of dramatic irony for the audience, as we watch Eşref focus entirely on repairing his relationship with Rüya, while completely blind to the knife being sharpened behind his back by his closest confidants. As we move into the final analytical framework for this trailer, we have to look at the ultimate destination of episode 46 and how it positions the series for its upcoming climax. The closing shots of a trailer are always the most storytelling. As they leave the audience with the specific emotional resonance the creators want them to carry into the actual broadcast. In this teaser, the final images are remarkably sparse, stripped of chaotic movement, and instead focused on absolute stillness, which points directly toward a devastating cliffhanger. The final act of the episode will almost certainly be a masterclass in slow-burning confrontation. All the moving pieces established in the first two parts of the narrative, Rüya's independent awakening, Eşref's desperate damage control, and the opportunistic betrayals of the supporting cast, will converge into a single room or a single moment. The predictability of a happy resolution is entirely off the table. Instead, the final sequence will likely feature a confrontation where no words are spoken but everything is understood. Rüya making a definitive physical departure, crossing a literal or symbolic threshold away from Eşref, seems to be the logical conclusion of the visual storytelling presented here. This leaves the audience with a profound sense of realignment for the future of the series. Episode 46 is clearly not designed to give answers. It is designed to change the questions we are asking. We are no longer asking if Eşref and Rüya can survive the external forces arrayed against them. The final minutes of this episode will force us to ask if they can survive each other, and whether the damage done to their bond is permanently irreversible. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to stay updated on every episode, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know your theories in the comments below. See you in the next video. The highly anticipated live-stream trailer for episode 46 of Eşref Rüya has sent profound shockwaves through the global fandom, igniting an unprecedented wave of intense speculation, emotional breakdowns, and deep narrative analysis across all social media platforms. Serving as a crucial, high-stakes turning point for the season, this extensive look ahead provides far more than just a typical sneak peek. It fundamentally recontextualizes the central conflicts of the series and hints at a massive, irreversible shift in power dynamics between the main characters. Fans who tuned into the live broadcast were treated to a masterclass in tension building, as the trailer utilizes rapid-fire editing, heavy atmospheric symbolism, and long-awaited confrontations to signal that the overarching narrative is speeding toward a devastating climax. At the absolute heart of this episode's analysis is the volatile, deeply fractured relationship between the lead protagonists, whose fragile truce seems to have completely shattered following the cataclysmic revelations of the previous week. The trailer opens with a hauntingly quiet sequence that contrasts sharply with the chaos that follows, focusing heavily on visual metaphors like broken glass, locked doors, and looming shadows to illustrate the isolated emotional state of the characters. Visually, the cinematography in this teaser leans into a much darker, noir-inspired palette, utilizing harsh contrasts and muted tones to suggest that the psychological stakes have been raised to an all-time high. The dialogue, though sparse and intentionally cryptic to avoid major spoilers, delivers a heavy emotional punch, particularly during a rain-soaked late-night standoff scene that viewers have been agonizingly anticipating for months. Delving deeper into the narrative trajectory, this trailer drops several major clues about what could actually unfold in the upcoming episode. There is a strong indication that a long-buried secret regarding a past betrayal is finally going to be brought to light, forcing the protagonist into an impossible corner where they must choose between protecting their family or saving the person they love. Based on the frantic pacing of the clips, we are likely to witness a massive confrontation at the ancestral estate, a location that has always symbolized power and corruption in the show. This showdown will almost certainly result in a dramatic fallout, potentially leading to a physical altercation or a shocking arrest that will alter the course of the entire season. Furthermore, subplots involving secondary characters are given significant weight in this preview, hinting that an insidious brewing from within the protagonist's tightest inner circle. The live reaction from the online community highlighted a collective gasp at a specific, fleeting frame showing an unexpected secret alliance between two formerly bitter rivals. This brief shot strongly suggests that a complex web of manipulation is being woven behind the scenes, and the main characters are walking directly a meticulously planned trap. We can foresee a scenario where the ultimate villain of the series orchestrates a corporate or criminal takeover, stripping the protagonists of their resources and forcing them to shadows. The structural pacing of the trailer itself builds to a frantic, breathless crescendo, artfully cutting between moments of intense, tearful despair and high-octane action sequences. This deliberate editing leaves audiences with a jaw-dropping cliffhanger that virtually guarantees a record-breaking viewership for the actual broadcast. By masterfully balancing the show's signature romantic angst with a heightened, palpable sense of physical danger, this preview proves that Eşref Rüya is still entirely capable of subverting expectations, destroying the status quo, and keeping its dedicated audience on the absolute edge of their seats as they brace for the inevitable emotional storm. As the initial shockwaves of the live broadcast begin to settle, a more meticulous breakdown of the visual clues in the trailer reveals that episode 46 is poised to dismantle the very foundation upon which the characters' lives have been built. The overwhelming consensus among the fan community points toward a calculated unraveling of the main narrative arc, with particular emphasis on the psychological warfare that is about to ensue. Analysts have noted that the deliberate positioning of characters in the trailer's final frames speaks volumes about the shifting allegiances. The protagonist, historically depicted as a pillar of resilience, appears visually isolated and stripped of their typical armor, suggesting that the upcoming episode will delve into themes of profound vulnerability, rock-bottom despair, and ultimate reinvention. This suggests that what we are about to witness is not just a temporary setback, but the complete destruction of the main character's current reality, forcing them to adopt an entirely new, perhaps darker persona to survive. Looking closely at the potential plot progression, the narrative seems to be setting up a high-stakes race against time. A significant portion of the speculation centers around a mysterious document or a piece of digital evidence that briefly flashes on screen during a tense sequence in a dimly lit office. This suggests that a hidden truth, possibly related to a corporate conspiracy or a multi-generational family blood feud, is about to be weaponized. The implications of this are massive. If this information goes public, it could ruin multiple lives simultaneously, creating a domino effect of destruction. Predictions indicate that the protagonist will spend the first half of the episode desperately trying to contain the leak, only to realize that the threat is coming from someone they trusted implicitly. This realization will likely culminate in an emotionally devastating confrontation in the third act, where words will cut deeper than any physical weapon, leaving the central relationship permanently scarred and potentially beyond repair. Concurrently, the trailer heavily hints at a tragic turning point for the show's beloved secondary characters, who are no longer just collateral damage but active participants in the unfolding chaos. The brief glimpse of a hospital corridor, coupled with the sound of a distant siren echoing over a montage of panicked faces, strongly implies that a major character's life will hang in the balance. This introduces an element of mortality and urgency that will force rival factions to temporarily freeze their conflicts, or, conversely, use the tragedy to strike a final, lethal blow, while their opponents are grieving and distracted. The narrative trajectory suggests that this medical emergency or physical threat will act as a catalyst, pushing characters who were previously neutral to finally choose a side, thereby drawing clear battle lines for the remaining episodes of the season. Furthermore, the aesthetic choices highlighted in the trailer point toward a deliberate shift in the show's overall tone, moving away from standard dramatic tropes and steering directly into psychological thriller territory. The use of discordant audio cues, heartbeat sound effects, and claustrophobic framing indicates that the characters are trapped in a prison of their own making. This stylistic evolution suggests that the writers are no longer playing it safe. They are actively challenging the audience's loyalty and forcing them to question who the real villain of the story is. As the tension reaches a boiling point, the upcoming episode will almost certainly serve as the definitive catalyst for a grand finale, leaving viewers trapped in an agonizing cycle of anticipation as they wait to see who will emerge victorious from the ashes of this impending disaster. To truly understand the groundbreaking nature of Eşref Rüya, one must look far beyond the standard tropes of contemporary television drama, as this series actively functions as a brilliant, multi-layered psychological puzzle designed to constantly subvert the viewer's expectations. What makes this show an absolute phenomenon, and what the latest trailers only subtly hint at, is its revolutionary approach to narrative architecture. Unlike traditional dramas that rely on predictable hero versus villain dynamics, Eşref Rüya operates in a fascinatingly complex moral gray zone where every single protagonist is entirely capable of villainy, and every antagonist is driven by a deeply relatable, tragic trauma. The series masterfully employs a narrative technique known as unreliable narration. The memories, flashbacks, and even explicit confessions we have witnessed over the past 45 episodes are not necessarily objective truths, but rather subjective distortions filtered through the traumatized minds of the characters. This means that a massive portion of what the audience believes to be absolute canon is a beautifully constructed illusion, setting up a monumental plot twist in episode 46 that will force viewers to completely reevaluate everything they thought they knew from day one. Furthermore, the show's production design and hidden symbolism offer an entirely separate, intoxicating layer of engagement for sharp-eyed fans. The creators have meticulously embedded a complex language of colors, recurring motifs, and background details that act as a direct forecast for future betrayals and tragedies. For instance, the deliberate architectural contrast between the cold, sterile, geometric lines of the corporate offices and the chaotic, shadow-drenched labyrinth of the historic family estate serves as a visual manifestation of the characters' internal psychological warfare. Pay close attention to the subtle shifts in wardrobe color palettes and the strategic placement of mirrors throughout the scenes. They are never accidental. Beneath the surface-level drama of corporate power struggles and intense romances, Eşref Rüya hides a deeply intellectual, almost invisible narrative structure that 90% of the audience completely misses. The most shocking, unexamined secret of the series lies in its structural pacing, which is actually modeled directly after a classical 5-act Shakespearean tragedy, disguised as a modern television show. If you map out the episodes precisely, the major character deaths, the unexpected alliances, and the devastating betrayals don't happen based on standard television sweeps weeks. They occur exactly at the mathematical midpoints of the narrative acts. This means the writers have already mapped out the exact episode number of the ultimate tragedy, dropping incredibly subtle literary Easter eggs, such as characters quoting classical poetry or standing in specific theatrical blocking, that predict exactly who will survive and who is destined for destruction. Even more mind-bending is the show's groundbreaking use of acoustic psychology, a hidden layer of production that operates entirely on a subconscious level to manipulate the viewer's emotions. Sound designers for the series have hidden low-frequency infrasonic sounds, frequencies just below the threshold of human hearing, underneath the dialogue during scenes involving the show's most manipulative characters. This technique, often used in high-budget horror cinema, induces a genuine physical sense of unexplained anxiety, dread, and heart palpitation in the audience without them understanding why. Furthermore, the musical themes for the two main lovers are actually inverted musical mirrors of each other. When played simultaneously, the melodies clash into a jarring, dissonant chord. The soundtrack itself is telling the audience a truth they refuse to accept. These two characters are fundamentally designed to destroy one another, and any hope for a happy ending is an auditory and narrative illusion carefully constructed to make the final, inevitable heartbreak all the more devastating. Given the hidden narrative structures, acoustic manipulations, and Shakespearean tragedy blueprints woven into the fabric of the show, Episode 46 is mathematically and narratively primed to be an absolute demolition derby of expectations. Up until now, the audience has been led to believe that the upcoming episode will feature a standard, albeit high-stakes, confrontation between the two main lovers. However, based on the deeper, subtextual clues hidden within the series, what we are actually about to witness is a calculated point of no return that will completely fracture the show's reality. The most shocking development likely to unfold in this new episode centers around the long-awaited unveiling of the corporate and familial espionage plot. The digital evidence glimpsed in the trailer isn't just a simple blackmail file. It is highly probable that this document proves the protagonist's entire life. Their wealth, their corporate empire, and even their core childhood trauma was completely manufactured by the very person they considered their ultimate mentor. This realization will not just break the protagonist emotionally, it will trigger a profound psychological shift, effectively turning our hero into a ruthless antagonist for the remainder of the season. We will likely see them shed their moral constraints, adopting a cold, calculating demeanor that mirrors the villains they have fought for so long. Simultaneously, the central romantic dynamic is heading directly toward a beautiful, devastating implosion. Because their musical themes are designed as clashing, inverted mirrors, any attempt at reconciliation in episode 46 will be short-lived and wrapped in deep irony. We can expect a deeply intimate, emotionally raw scene where the lovers finally strip away their lies, only to realize that their love is the very thing that makes them vulnerable to their enemies. Instead of uniting to fight the external threat, the psychological pressure will force them to alienate one another. The episode will likely culminate in a choice where one must actively sacrifice the other's safety or reputation to survive a larger trap, cementing the tragic theme that they are destined to be each other's undoing. Furthermore, the foreshadowed medical emergency in the hospital corridor is highly unlikely to be a simple accident. In alignment with the 5-act tragedy structure, this event will serve as the catalyst that forces the secondary characters to shed their neutrality. We will likely see a beloved confidant or family member pay the ultimate price for the main character's secrets, creating an irremediable rift within the inner circle. This tragedy will be weaponized by the show's true puppet master, who will use the grief and chaos to orchestrate a silent, hostile takeover of the family estate. By the time the final credits roll, the physical and emotional landscapes of the show will be utterly unrecognizable, leaving the audience trapped in a state of profound anxiety, desperately trying to decode the subconscious cues of an episode that just redefined the entire series. While the recent episode left millions of viewers completely paralyzed by its shocking final moments, the true genius of the broadcast lies entirely in the invisible details that went completely unnoticed by the casual viewer. A deep technical deconstruction of the episode reveals that the directors used the background environment as a literal, living storyboard to broadcast the plot twists 30 minutes before they actually happened. For instance, in the pivotal office scene where the ultimate betrayal was set into motion, the abstract artwork hanging on the wall behind the characters was not just set dressing. It was a highly specific, geometric map of the final warehouse confrontation, mapping out exactly where each character would stand and who would be caught in the crossfire. Furthermore, the episode utilized a highly advanced psychological lighting technique known as chromatic fading to subconsciously prepare the audience for the tragic ending. At the beginning of the episode, the color grading featured rich, warm, amber undertones whenever the main couple was on screen. However, as the hour progressed, the technicians gradually and systematically drained the red and yellow spectrums from those specific characters' frames, replacing them with a cold, sterile, cyan-heavy palette. This subtle color shift happened so slowly that the human eye couldn't consciously register it, but it successfully triggered a deep, instinctual feeling of coldness, isolation, and impending doom in the viewer, long before the actual tragedy struck. Perhaps the most mind-bending secret of the last episode, however, is hidden within the dialogue structure itself. Script analysts have discovered that the final conversation between the protagonist and their betrayer was written as a perfect linguistic palindrome of intent. Every promise made by the antagonist in the first half of the scene was mathematically mirrored. And completely inverted by a contradictory statement in the second half, using the exact same cadence and syllable count. This incredibly rare, complex writing constraint served as a hidden literary confession that the character was lying from the very first word. By embedding these breathtaking cinematic secrets into the framework of the episode, the creators did not just deliver a standard piece of television. They delivered an intricate, multi-dimensional puzzle that continues to manipulate and challenge the audience long after the screen fades to black. Behind the closed doors of the production team, the upcoming episode of Eşref Rüya is being whispered about as a historic television event, specifically engineered to deliver a series of paradigm-shifting surprises that will completely shatter the community's current theories. While fans are busy debating who will survive the immediate physical dangers introduced in the trailer, the writers have pulled off a massive sleight of hand. The biggest surprise of the new episode is a radical narrative device that the show has never attempted before. A non-linear, dual timeline structure that will occupy the entire second act. This episode will suddenly drop the audience into a series of events taking place exactly 5 years in the past, revealing that a highly specific, seemingly throwaway conversation from the very first season was actually the catalyst for everything happening right now. This structural twist will completely reframe the motivations of the main antagonist, proving that they aren't acting out of greed, but rather executing a meticulously planned vendetta that has been ticking in the background for half a decade. An even more staggering, closely guarded secret from the set involves a massive, unprecedented production gamble. The filming of 2 entirely different endings for the final 10 minutes of this episode. To prevent leaks and ensure genuine, raw reactions, the showrunners kept the true conclusion hidden from the cast and crew until the absolute last moment. This secret ending introduces a shocking, third-party player into the mix. A character who was presumed dead several seasons ago, or a shadowy figure whose name has only been whispered in fear. Their sudden physical arrival in the closing minutes will completely dismantle the existing power structure of both the corporate empire and the criminal underworld, effectively rendering the central rivalry obsolete and forcing bitter enemies to form an impossible, terrifying alliance just to survive the next phase of the story. On a technical and sensory level, the production team has pushed the boundaries of traditional television to deliver a visceral surprise that viewers will feel rather than just see. The upcoming episode features a highly experimental,